What does it take to make workshops work? And how can we facilitate collaboration that sticks and leads to results? My name is Miriam Hatness, and with the Workshops Work podcast, I'm on the mission to find the magic ingredients that make workshops work. Today with me on the show is Lisette Sutherland, and we speak about working from anywhere and how to make remote work work. So stay tuned. And by the way, if you don't have pen and paper at hand to take your own notes, scroll down to the show notes to download the free one-page summary. And now, enjoy the show. Oh, and by the way, if you want to support the show to remain free and accessible, please consider a small donation via workshops.work/support. And now, back to the show. Hello, Lisette. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you. I am really honored actually to be here. I'm not just saying that. I listened to your podcast and I've sat in on a session with you now in a workshop, and it's exciting to be here.
Oh, thank you. We had an exploration call, and I was so intrigued of your way of preparing workshops and this theme of performance that feels so counterintuitive to me. So I'm full of curiosity to explore that, how you work and what you do. And before we get there, I always start with the same question. When did you start calling yourself a facilitator? And actually, do you?
It seems a really natural word now, but I first started calling myself a facilitator when I was trying to sell online workshops 10 years ago. And I used the word facilitator because I needed to differentiate myself. People were not expecting interactive workshops. They were expecting webinars. And so you really had to set expectations before the event started, because people would show up thinking that they were going to get entertained, and all of a sudden they're in breakout rooms and so it was just so different. So I really used facilitator purposefully, do as much as I could to differentiate. Like, when you come to this, it's not going to be a webinar.
True. And I think it only became a bit more normal. It normalized throughout the pandemic. And before that, it was speakers or trainings, and it was basically killing the audience with the PowerPoint karaoke, right?
Oh, yeah. And it's so interesting because before the pandemic, I used to have companies call me and say they want a workshop about remote working in person. They wanted me to fly there and give it in person to the team. And because they couldn't grasp that you could do interactive things online, they just weren't doing them yet. And they'd never seen anybody do it well. Right. Because just like you said, you show up and you're then bombarded with PowerPoints. Even to this day, I show up to things that say that they're workshops, and they're not. I've shown up and sat through 75 minutes without saying a single word to anybody in workshops. So even now, I still think it's not completely normalized. So before I would make these contracts with the company, and I would say, okay, I will do half a day in person, and then we do 2 sessions online. So let's not do the full day workshop, let's compromise. And that would usually work. So they, it'd be like, because it makes sense to them too, when you explain it, hey, it's a workshop about remote working. It would be absurd to do the whole thing in person.
Yes. And I even wonder what bits would you do in person?
Well, I've actually, I spent a lot of time crafting that workshop. So there's actually I could do the whole thing in person now at this point with the various, because the activities all translate. But instead of using Miro, you would use, a real whiteboard, or you would really draw things out. But I think what doesn't translate is that the workshop has been designed to be experiential. So you start with a random group of people, usually they're public workshops. So you're just showing up with random people. But by the end of the 4 sessions, you're a team, and that's done on purpose. And so you miss a lot in person. You still get the information, but you don't get the experience.
And I think you don't get the muscle memory that it can be engaging and intriguing to work online, that you can connect despite the screen if you don't experience it.
Totally. Because you can tell people everything. You can tell them what's going to happen, but certain things you have to experience.
Yeah.
So even in part of my workshops, I had one of the sessions we would meet in a virtual office, because I kept telling people about virtual offices, But until you're in it, it doesn't make any sense. Like, and once you're in it, you're like, oh, like click, I get it. Like, I get how I might use this. So yeah, there's all kinds of things like that.
So what do you understand by a virtual office?
For me, virtual offices, there's a number of tools out there where you can actually be present in an office online in a browser. So for instance, Sakoko or Welo, Kumo Space, GatherTown, there's a whole bunch of them.
Okay.
And really all it does is it gives you a plan view of an office and then avatars for where people are. And so you can only see and hear the people that are in the same room, but you can see where everybody else is and join other rooms.
Yeah.
Like, so for workshops, it's ideal.
Yeah.
I think the problem is getting people to use the technology and to actually prepare the technology before the session starts.
Yes.
I still can't, I have not solved that still to this day.
We're hosting the Never Done Before festival on Velo. And usually we have a week or two on onboarding sessions, explaining, recording videos, what they can expect, how to use it, and to really explain the beauty of it. I think the idea that everyone is just a click away and that you don't have to schedule time to meet someone, but can just double click your avatar into their office and knock on the door. I think that's amazing.
Well, and all the etiquettes that you learn.
Yes.
Like so many etiquettes change, like knocking on somebody's virtual door or just coming, like you could just barge in. When I ran a virtual co-working group it was Sakoko, but it's I think they both exist now, Welo and Sakoko, but we ran a virtual co-working group. And I remember I was busy on a project and I was like looking at sticky notes on my floor. And all of a sudden I heard this voice like, hello. And I literally, my heart was like, boom, boom, boom. I jumped up to look around at who was in my apartment, but it was somebody who had come into my virtual office. But it felt so real. It felt so real. So like, I know people are hearing this, but until you experience it, that's the challenge. Like indeed, and you prepare people for 2 weeks and still the day of. Yeah. It's really difficult to get people to try it or just to understand like 5 minutes of playing around and you'll be fine. That's all it takes. It's so easy, but it takes 5 minutes.
Yeah, it's change. And I think there's always this fear of, oh, what if I don't understand it or it doesn't work, or how do I behave? What is the code? How do we behave?
That's also true. You're right. Good point, because it's intimidating.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to be like all of a sudden thrust on a stage accidentally.
Exactly. I realized later that this was one of the biggest concerns of people who would then click on the link, because I told them, okay, there's just one link you need, and then you're in the festival. But what we usually think of one link to join something is suddenly we are all eyes on us because we came late and we're in a Zoom room.
Right.
Although in Velo, no, you arrive at the lobby and then someone will say hello and guide you towards the workshop. So you're not intrusive or you're not interrupting something.
Right. Right. And it's very gentle.
Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. Indeed. If done well, it's very gentle. Yeah.
Exactly. If there's no one to welcome you and you're just at the lobby and don't know how to navigate and how to find the group, it can also be frustrating.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've built in so much tech into one of the other versions of the workshop. Like one session is Zoom. The next one we were doing Zoom plus Lucid meetings, as like a meeting guide so that people could experience what it's like to have good meeting sessions. And then the next one we would use Sakoko to be in a virtual office. And then for feedback, we would do something else, like we'd be back in Zoom. But it was so much tech. Mm-hmm. Like people were just not prepared for the barrage. And we were using whiteboards, and it was actually so much. Even to this day, it's still too much. It's too experiential at that point. I found. Yeah. So I've really had to scale it back because I was having people beam in on telepresence robots, and we were trying all kinds of stuff. It was just too much stuff. People just wanted more information than experience.
Interesting, or maybe experiences spoon-fed. Because I also, two thoughts came to my mind. One is, if the audience of these workshops are facilitators, then I think it's even more difficult, because as facilitator, we are so used to be in the driving seat. So we are in control of the experience and the tech and what will happen. So we are used to pushing others outside of their comfort zone. And then suddenly to be in this position of not understanding the tech and not knowing what to do and where to go, I think can be especially intimidating because we haven't trained the muscle.
Yeah. And indeed, the audience for my workshops are not necessarily facilitators. They are sometimes, but they're more teams. Okay. Because my workshops really focus on how do you work better remotely. So it's not, and it includes facilitating online as part of that, but that's just part of the bigger remote work. So it's even not facilitators. So it's even more intimidating.
Lucky you.
For the average. Yeah. And facilitators, they're, you've got like the pros, you've got to be super on. Totally. Yeah. I've just got like normal teams, trying to work better together.
And I like what you said about the overwhelm of too much tech. How do you find the balance of, because I think the tech can be enhancing of an experience, it can be overwhelming, and it can also be distracting.
Totally.
So when would you introduce another tool or another tab? And when would you rather say, you know what, let's go into breakout rooms and have a conversation?
I've really experimented a lot with this. So for me, I've thought about because it can get as cool as it can get in the way. So what I've really tried to do now is it truly relevant to the conversation? Does it really add something because we're using the whiteboard? Or would it be better just to talk about it? Like, do we really need to write this down together, like on sticky notes? Or can we just talk? So I used to have the whole workshop was in Miro and I loved it. Like everything was I could zoom around. It was great for me. But as a participant, unless you were a Miro pro, it was just a lot of information being thrown at you. So now I've scaled it back quite a bit. I've started just taking a lot of stuff off and offering it in different moments. Like all of the handouts, for instance, I used to have those all on the Miro board. But now I've just got a separate web page where people can access that when they're ready. So you can use the Miro board if you want to go back to those thoughts, but the information, just download it here when you're ready. And the other stuff comes in a different form. So yeah, so it has to add something to the exercise for us to be using it.
And I like what you say, it has to add to the exercise from the perspective of the user and not your own perspective. I was just thinking of the early days of PowerPoint, not even the early days, maybe the early days as a speaker. So when we don't really know the material, it's so nice to have a lot of PowerPoints because these are basically your speaking notes. So it's not necessarily for the audience, but for yourself. And I think with a Miro board, it can be we can fall into the same trap. If we have everything on Miro board, then it's just, we just follow the flow.
Yeah, but for some people, Miro is like nails on a chalkboard. Like maybe you like mural and you're just used to that and you really, or you can't access Miro because your company's, I have that a lot. I work with a lot of banks for some reason. And so they it's Microsoft Teams all the way.
Oh God.
Awful.
How do you make this work?
I charge them more. I charge them more for the pain because logging into their systems is really difficult because I'm an outsider that has to all of a sudden get access to their systems. And it means that I can't run certain functionality. Like I can't run breakout rooms from being an outsider. We can't even use the whiteboard. So we're super limited. So I've got to do much more coordination. I've got to have somebody else there who can run the breakout rooms, right? I have to ask for volunteers. So I do it because it's the reality of their situation. But it's way more painful for me.
And I love the fact that you charge for the additional pain and the additional work. Yes.
It really is a lot of time.
Yeah.
They don't realize you spend.
I refuse. So maybe charging more is another option.
Yeah, because it's going to take more time. But these poor people have to collaborate every day in Microsoft Teams.
Yeah.
And so I feel like I can't just leave out that whole population. These are also remote workers.
Yes, of course. Especially for your context, then it's the same as hosting it on site when it's actually remote. Then why teaching them what you could do on Zoom, but welcome to reality, you cannot.
Right. So what else can we do?
Yeah.
It's just a different challenge set, but I don't make it my problem
Yeah.
I really, and everybody understands because 90% of the people that are in the sessions with teams, they hate teams too. And then you've got 10% who are like, I don't understand the problem. Like, this is so great.
Yeah, it translates your PowerPoint slides automatically.
Yeah, exactly,
At least there's one benefit.
It adds 5 minutes at the end of meetings for a break automatically. Like, yay. Yeah.
Yeah. If you planned and facilitated your meetings, you would have these 5 minutes anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
So what is your trick then if you have to work with teams for remote?
One, I make it more about what is possible for me. So I use to like show my slides as a weather woman. So I'll present more content because it's going to be necessary. So I'll spend more time talking and then we'll do polls, but then I'll call on people. Like we'll do a simple poll that asks the question of the audience. And then I'll say like, okay, who are our early birds in the audience? Like, okay, Jose, how early is early for you? And I start to just call and draw people out in that sense. So not too much, like 3 answers or so. And then people are like, I don't need to hear everybody's like, what's early for you? And then we still do breakout rooms and we just leave a little bit longer for people to discuss.
Yeah.
Because what I'm doing is I'm presenting content, but then I want them to internalize it in their own context in the breakout room. So that I'm hopefully teaching them and showing them something new or a new way of doing it and giving some examples of how other teams are doing it. And then like, okay, take it back to your team. What's one way that you could decrease the number of meetings you're currently having?
Yeah. And I think in these conversations, actually, the participants learn the most anyway, if they can discuss and apply it to themselves. And I wonder whether the silver lining is actually that you slow down the entire process. Because with Zoom, it's so easy and so quick. I would throw people in a breakout room for just 5 minutes.
Right.
And then it can also become very tiring for participants that it feels like a sprint, constantly on the run.
Right. And they need some time to just like sit and digest a bit as well. Yeah. But with Microsoft Teams, it takes like a minute just for the breakout room to open. Like, so you're all just sitting there like, okay.
What a mindful experience. Hey, let's take a moment to just be and breathe.
Yeah, behind the scenes, I'm sweating bullets. I'll be honest. Like it stresses me out. It's not smooth. And I know how much better it could be.
Yeah.
Maybe the participants don't, but for me, it's just cringing the whole way. But yeah, this is the reality. Reality. And I could refuse the workshops and make less money, but I'd prefer to just sit in it. I used to refuse them, but it's just too many now.
Yeah. Yeah, makes sense. And then it's good that you found a way around to just deal with reality. And at the end of the day, yeah, it's they have to deal with it. So you're better to help them.
Well, yeah, and it's not about the tool. It's the principles behind remote working go with any tool. So for that, it's just a roadblock for me giving workshops because it may be a great collaboration tool, but it's not a good workshop tool. And sometimes, every once in a while, you can talk to the IT department and get a one-time exception saying like, it's not a good tool for workshops, and they all know, and every once in a while you can get an exception.
Nice. So if it's not the tool that makes a workshop fail, what makes a workshop fail?
I've had to think long and hard about this one. One is it's not interactive enough. Like you said, like the fact that I could attend 75 minutes and never say a word, something's wrong there. And I was even in a breakout room, but in one of my breakout rooms, because I'm so comfortable online and extroverted, I can easily take over a conversation. Like I'll just jump right in. I'm like raising my hand, like I'm not afraid. So for some reason, I'm not afraid. And so when I'm in somebody else's workshop, I tend to be more quiet because I don't want to dominate. But in this case, when I do that, it turns out that other people just take so much time. They're just not aware of the time, I guess. And I don't want to take over because my natural inclination is just to take over. And so sometimes we'll just wait. And then we're at the end and I'm like, well, there was no time for me. Like, okay. And then we go back and I just kind of note like, okay, this happened. So I make notes like, because I'm trying to figure out how to do it better in my workshops too. So while I'm in other people's, I'm taking notes for do's and don'ts for myself. So not being interactive enough is what to me makes workshops fail. And then the other one is not balancing interaction with content. because I don't want to just show up and just talk to people. I'm also there to learn. And so, yes, you can learn from talking to people, but that's random. Like I also want the planned learning
Mm.
a bit as part, like I also want some content like, oh, okay, teach me something. And then I also want to interact, but I also want the content. So there's a balance there that.
Yeah. I love the way how you then just switch to the meta level. So you participate in workshops, something doesn't work as you would like it, and then you just take notes to learn for your own practice. And I think we often underestimate the learning potential from participating.
Oh man. I mean, for a long time, I didn't participate in other people's workshops because I didn't want to copy. I really wanted my material to be authentic and to come from like my idea. And I did that for a really long time. And then I started to think like, well, who am I? Like, how do I know like, how do I know?
It's like an author who never read a book before.
Right.
How can that happen?
I mean, it was really, it was like I didn't want to read other people's books on remote work because I didn't want it to influence what I was going to write. I wanted it to be like, oh, what am I learning? Like, this is from my brain. And so that, like, the book was written like that. But then with the workshops, I started to feel really insecure. And I started to attend other people's sessions just to understand like how it works. Because what I also learned is there are learning and design professionals who study how to create. Mine came just from trial and error over 10 plus years. I just sort of started doing it naively. And I just recently learned that there's like people who like go to school for this. And so I started to feel very insecure about like, oh my God, who am I to do this? I mean, my workshops get good reviews, but why?
Mm. Ooh, so what did you learn what was the biggest aha when you suddenly stepped into someone else's workshop?
That there were many different styles and that none of them were bad. There's just many different styles. And I feel like it was also confirmation that I had gone down a pretty good path. I was working with an academic life coach as just a virtual coworker by chance. We got put together on a project and then just never stopped working together. And so we just worked together for 9 years. And she was and she did her academic life coaching online. She helped tutor students in school that were going to college. So they were away from home, but they'd never learned how to study. Like, it sounds really weird, but like, if you don't actually learn how to study, like, how do you summarize a book? Like, how do you do things like that? And so she was teaching them how to study. And I was learning from her, teaching her students how to study. Like, she had these virtual whiteboards she would hold up and like write on them and make it interactive. And so we just started experimenting together. And that because after working with Gretchen, I started reading Training from the Back of the Room. And so I felt like the principles, I got them right without knowing it, luckily. And so now it's just a matter of learning more styles, more exercises, more activities. And I also need to be very conscious that what I do is I don't teach people how to facilitate. I'm very clear. Like, I don't teach facilitation. I teach how to work remotely. And so I'm really it's really a distinction.
Yeah. Yeah, because facilitation is part of it.
Right. It's one component.
Yeah.
There's the tools and the management and the team building and
the communication and the channels.
Work conflict and the working together. Yeah. How do you show appreciation? So I have to be careful. I've gone down the road, especially during the pandemic. People were asking me like, well, how do you design workshops? And I thought, oh, I could do a workshop on how to design workshops. And that's when I started getting really insecure. Was I started realizing that, oh, there's actually professionals out there that understand the science behind this. And who am I to tell you how to design a workshop? So, we created one and it was good, but, yeah,
it's interesting.
I don't know how to end that. We created it. Yeah. But I have to be very focused on, I teach people how to work remotely. That's really what I'm focused on.
Yeah. It's interesting how the imposter then suddenly kicks in when we become aware of the world outside and how much there actually is. On the other hand, I think that once the imposter kicks in, it actually also shows that we have a quite good overview of what quality means, that we are in the position to actually identify what high quality is and to see ourselves in the spectrum?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I've done thousands of iterations on the workshop, right? Like I've nonstop for the last 10 plus years, I've been working on these workshops nonstop. So that's, there's some confidence there because I've tried so many things. And it's analogous, like when you start to talk about performance, it's really analogous to like a stand-up comedian who is going out there and trying material. Like, does this joke land? Like, it's funny, but it doesn't land, or and so like, oh, this bit doesn't quite work. Or maybe if I switch the jokes, then the flow would be better. And so that's how I see the workshop having been developed. Like I've gone out on stage and I've practiced every act in various ways.
I find this fascinating because, well, there's a spectrum of how we show up in the workshops we host, right? There's some who do stick to a script or to a flow that is pre-planned, orchestrated, and others who really thrive in the improvisation. And what I thought was that we all start with a more orchestrated way because, we might not feel secure or we don't know. And then we rather, stick to what we've planned. And then the more we get into the flow or we have the experience, we become more loose and more flexible. But what I hear from you is that you constantly, continuously iterate the script and the design. You stick to it.
Yeah, that is indeed. And there is some improv because, of course, things come up that you don't expect. And so that's also where the experience of other workshops come in. But indeed, because I have an intentionally crafted story to tell. And so when you join the workshop, it is like from the first exercise to the last, it's been crafted to show you information in a particular way, to take it in a particular way. So it isn't, and I didn't mean to do that from the beginning, but that's just sort of how I naturally worked. And maybe, again, we were talking before when you interviewed me before for this about how my work with bands. And maybe it was my work with bands that sort of influenced it because you could see that night after night, every show would develop. Like by the time you get to the last show is amazing usually because you've worked through every, because every show you're like, let's switch these two songs and see how that works. And then like you try it and it's like, that did not work at all. Oh my God, that was the weirdest flow. Like it really changes the vibe of the night. And so that's what in my workshop, I have a vibe and I have an experience that I want you to have. And what's interesting is I actually have a community of facilitators who give this workshop. So they pay a licensing fee and they get access to the material. And I always say to them, like, if you're going to advertise it as the Work Together Anywhere workshop, then it needs to be at least 70% of the material that I've crafted. And then 30% is, of course, your stories and your exercises, your tools, like it's your personality. But it's still 70% so that people all over will get the same experience. If if you've taken the Work Together Anywhere workshop, then you've had this experience.
Yeah.
And so other things, I'll try other things, but I won't call it Work Together Anywhere. Like that is a show. That's a show.
I love that. And so what is needed there's so many layers. One layer is whether you design for the energy flow or what do you understand by the story or the show that you design? And then how important is it that the facilitator feels confident performing, in air quotes?
I don't say to other facilitators, like, this is a show, you must perform it this way. Like, that's really my own thing. I give them the material and I say, you do what you want with it. I don't even check in. What we look at is the evaluations of the participants after the workshop. Like, were the participants happy? Then I'm good, right? Like, I trust the facilitators to do it in the way that works best for them and their participants. So I really only construct it for myself as a show. And I've now forgotten the initial question again. I'm so excited about
whether you design for energy or for a story. So how do you design your workshops?
I design it because I've got like every session, there's 4 sessions for Work Together Anywhere, and every session has a theme. And so like the first session is all about individual productivity and team alignment. So the activities that I've chosen are there to enhance people's perspective about those topics. Then the second session is all about how to have fewer and better meetings. So then all the exercises and the discussions, right? Everything's focused on that. And then the third, but what we're also doing throughout the sessions is we're doing team building in various ways. So, every session has a break. They're 90 minutes. There's a break in the middle, and we do an icebreaker at the beginning and an icebreaker in the middle. But they don't really feel like icebreakers because they're just the opening activity for like, okay, let's settle in, open the activity with a quick this. But the icebreaker is very intentional based on the topic. And so it teaches something. It's not just fluff to fill time. So that's how I've crafted it. So everything, so the exercises have just been evolving over time. Like maybe back 5 years ago, it was good, but now it's not relevant anymore. Like after the pandemic, Work Together Anywhere had to do a massive evolution during the pandemic because people's level of working remotely went so far up. Like before the pandemic, we were teaching people about lighting and webcams and like, what does your background look like? And then, after the pandemic, it was like, it's just not relevant anymore. Everybody's got that sorted out. We don't even have to, let's not waste time or doesn't care. Yeah, exactly. Let's not waste time on that anymore. Like, we can go deeper now.
Fascinating. And how did you go from touring with bands and helping them to put a show together to teaching how to work remotely?
Well, the only way that I could tour with bands is because I had a job working for an online project management tool. And the guy that ran the company was one of my best friends at the time and like one of my greatest mentors. And so he knew it was a very unique set of circumstances. He knew that this had been one of my favorite bands since I was a teenager. Like I was in my 30s at the time. So he knew that it was my favorite band. And so he enabled me to go, and he said like, hey, we're building a tool that allows people to work remotely. Why not try working from a van? And he says, as long as you get your work done, I don't care where you are. And so he gave me a mobile router. This was like 20 years ago. So you have to understand, like you couldn't even get access. He gave me a mobile router that I had to suction cup to my window. Yeah, I had to suction cup to the van window. And then when you got close to a city, you could get internet. But like in between cities in the US, there was no telephone and access. You couldn't get, there was nothing. So as soon as we got closer to a city, I was able to log in and like get some work done and do stuff. And then it was a crazy time. So I went from that because my mind opened at that time to what else was possible if location wasn't an option. All these people stuck in offices. I was working, having the time of my life on the road with my favorite band, getting work done with a team. It was like, who wouldn't want this? Like, you don't have to be on the road with a band, but like all the possibilities, my mind was flooded.
Yeah.
And who can go back after you've had that experience? Like you could never go back to an office after you've just spent years on the road working. And, it wasn't easy. It wasn't ideal by any means, but it was just such a mind-blowing experience. So I started researching how other people were doing this. Like what were the companies that were working remotely at the time? And it was like Basecamp and Soho and these kind of places. And my job for this online company was, among other things, researching the competition. So I just started going down the rabbit hole of researching the competition and like, oh, what are they doing? And oh. And yeah, years later, the workshop emerged. Making a very long story not so short.
And fascinating. And what did you learn from the time being affected? So being on the road and working in a job under these very clear constraints about how you teach working effectively remote today?
Well, what I always say is the future of work is flexibility. And in fact, I just started saying that. I used to say the future of work is choice, but it's actually not about choice. Is such a loaded, charged word, it means so many things for people, but flexibility, everybody understands. And that's really all people want, is the flexibility to work when and where they're most productive. And sometimes that's in an office with colleagues, and sometimes it's at home because your kids are sick. And so what I learned from the road is in order to get flexibility, your business has to be remote first. You have to have the systems and processes in place to be able to work from anywhere, even if you don't plan on doing it. But like before the pandemic, I was telling people, like, you want to have these systems and processes up anyway, because there's always bad weather, or your kids are sick, or the plumber between 8 and 5. Like, there's always a reason that you can't get to the office. It seems like such a big vulnerability. And I never would have used a pandemic as an example, because it sounds like you're just being dramatic. And I'm already, my husband calls me pomatic. I'm like poetic and dramatic at the same time. So I'm like pomatic. So I'm already pomatic, and so I wanted to like keep it real. And so, but when the pandemic came, I was like, see,
I told you so.
I told you so. I didn't really say that. I was just like, well, here we are, here we are.
Fascinating. And then what are the cornerstones? Because now there's so many tools that you can go down the rabbit hole of buying subscriptions for all these softwares as a service. And I sometimes have the impression that we easily fall into the trap that we research all these tools and then thinking of having the tools will basically do the work. It's like shoving the books that we order on Amazon under our pillow, hoping that
right, or put it on the nightstand. So if we look at them in the morning, it'll osmosis. Yeah. It's I'm a tool junkie, so this is always a tough one, but it's for sure not about the tool. It's really more about what I like to say is teams that collaborate intentionally together will have superpowers. So it's a matter of bringing that intentionality to how you work. And we start by creating user manuals for ourselves, like just really get clear on why we like working where we do and what we need in order to be productive. And then using that, those personal user manuals become really popular, but they're such a great way of communicating needs and getting to know people quickly. I was just like, I don't know why I didn't think of that 10 years ago, but that's my failure. In fact, somebody brought it up in an interview, I think in 2014, and it clicked and I used it, but I never, anyway, it was the idea, the seed was there ages. The next step would be to create a team agreement for how you're going to work together. It really became, this I learned in 2014 from a man named Phil Montero, who was way ahead of his time. So I like to just credit him now, just to let anybody listening, like Phil Montero was the man who came up with the team agreement for me like 10 plus years ago. And I recently interviewed an astronaut on my podcast, Paul Richards. And I had met him at an event in Seattle when I was visiting my sister, and just sort of cornered him and had the guts to ask him. And he said yes. And he was so kind. But I wanted to interview him about remote collaboration from space, because that's like to the extreme. And what he said is that astronauts train to have the right information at the right place at the right time, because you can listen in on every channel, you can listen to everything and to everyone, but you have to figure out what stuff to filter. And so they train to learn how to filter information so that they just get what they need when they need it. But it's always available somewhere. And that to me was like, yes, that's what teams need. We need to train to get the right information at the right place at the right time.
And I think that's what everyone needs. Especially that's what school kids need to learn, to distinguish the relevant from the irrelevant, because we're bombarded with information. And where do we find the right information at the right time? And how do we know that what kind of information we need?
And how do we keep out all of the excess stuff? Like, that is a huge task in and of itself. Just learning how to keep that out, especially in the information overload age. That is huge. It's a huge topic in the workshop too, because everybody's exhausted.
Yeah.
And there's too many meetings.
And this then also links back to what you said earlier. Do we really need a whiteboard? Do we really need to capture all of these ideas? Or can we just have a conversation about it?
Right. Because some things you're planting seeds. So it doesn't need to be captured. You're planting seeds for them to just kind of spiral in the context that they need to be in. And then, the tool can be in the way. Like, let's all go back to the whiteboard, and you can hear the collective, like, we were just in a flow.
Yeah.
You're like, do we have to? Like, if you want to visualize something, the whiteboard's great, or show pictures.
Or if the ideas really matter, if you need to just,
or if you need to build on something.
To build on them. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, you had a workshop where we were iterating on other people's ideas. And in that case, you need a place to capture the initial idea.
Yeah.
It's just a like logistical thing. So then the whiteboard's very handy. Then that's what you really want it.
And then to access the right information at the right time, you need basically a team agreement, if I understand you correctly, to know what kind of information is captured and which tool we need and use for what kind of process or information.
For instance, on my team, I don't work on the weekends. So, but my team are freelancers. They can work whenever they want. But if they need to get a hold of me on the weekend for whatever reason, like an email's not going to work. So in our team agreement, we just have to establish, like, if you really need me, no problem, just WhatsApp me on the weekend. And every team has like, tens of these rules that need to just be put down. Like, hey, we work between these core hours if you need something outside of the hours, or hey, let's not check our email all day. Let's agree that we just check in the morning and the evenings, but in between response times can go way down, like so that people don't feel like they have to sit in front of Slack. Like if you're an astronaut or if you're in headquarters in Houston, all the channel, you're just sitting in front of all the channels and letting it all come in. Like you could sit there and listen to it all day, but that's not the best use of your time.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we're doing as teams working remotely right now. Like, we've got all of our monitors and all the channels are open, like ding, 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 ding. And it's just causing total burnout.
Yeah. And I think it sounds as there's also where the facilitation bit then comes in to make the implicit explicit. Yes, it's okay to WhatsApp over the weekend, but only if it's really necessary. So how can we actually have an agreement that is explicit instead of assuming or not assuming, overthinking, worrying?
Yeah, because if you have to WhatsApp your boss and you're just like, is it necessary? Do I really want to? Do I need to WhatsApp? Is this important enough to WhatsApp on a Sunday? Like you could think for hours about that before shakily deciding that you really do need to do it, talking to a bunch of people and, and then you WhatsApp the boss and it's no big deal. Like, oh yeah, thanks so much. I'll totally get on that. Thanks. I'll get you that code, and you spent hours freaking out about it. Those are the kind of things that happens all the time.
Yeah. Or these inefficiencies. I'm thinking now of the module that you mentioned, how to have better meetings and reduce the number of meetings. It sounds as if we are unclear where to find information. Then there are all these inefficiencies where we involve more and more people just for searching the information or not disturbing a person we don't want to interact or don't think that we should interact with.
Or that we're scared. Yeah, indeed. And so when we go from the physical to the virtual world, more things become documentation in nature because of just the nature of the work, right? Like we're doing more text tool kind of things. It's less physical interaction. And so there's just more misunderstandings. And you have to think about your information architecture all of a sudden. Where is all this stuff going and how are we accessing? There's even an AI tool I just interviewed, and they said that the stats are that you spend 1 to 2 hours a day looking for information. And this tool searches all the tools that you use for like search words. So you can like search everything. That's what this tool does.
That's fascinating. Yeah.
To me, it seems like, it's a Band-Aid for the problem. Like the underlying problem is not getting solved.
Absolutely. And I have filled notebook after notebook with handwritten notes because I think while taking notes. But then recently I was like, I had this conversation somewhere. And then I started, okay, when was it? And which notebook did I use? And it's a disaster. So now I started to take handwritten notes on my iPad, on Apple Notes, because and I have hashtags then for that. But it took me half of a decade to actually make that step and digitalize my own handwritten notes. And
yeah. And, then you've got the question of like, is this the right tool? Like maybe what if you want to switch to Notion or Roam, something that's built for these kind of things. Then all of a sudden you're now dependent on Apple Notes or Roam that has all of your thoughts. Now you're dependent on the tool. yeah, there's so much. There's so much when we're thinking about the online world, just in terms of personal productivity, but then how do we sync with others?
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think it's then the shortcoming of not having a virtual office, as you mentioned before, because what I see the biggest problem or obstacle of online remote collaboration is that you cannot just pass by someone's office, knock on the door, and can I just quickly ask you a question?
I would say, there's pros and cons to that. When I was a project manager in an office, I had to actually put like a sign on my cubicle that said, please, for the next 2 hours, please do not interrupt me unless it's an emergency, because it was literally every few minutes that people were stopping by to ask, because I was the manager. And so people, it was a huge project. So I had like 20 people on my team. If everybody stops by once a day,
So
20
you were
people in 8
their
hours.
search everything tool.
Yeah, I mean, it was just like a really intense, big project,
Yeah.
and at some point I also had to get work done, but I'm in a cubicle in an open office.
Yeah.
So it was also impossible. And I started working from home just to get away from people because there was no empty office. It was crowded at the time. I could have found a different solution, I think. But it was really like, I just need like 3 hours to think, please. So there's pros and cons to that. I mean, for people like me, I'm a total introvert. Being around others in an office all day, I'm toasted. Just toasted. Don't like it at all. Also, it's not comfortable. It's always too cold, and I can't just sit there 8 hours straight. I don't know about you, but I am like in the garden. I go for walks. Like I really take advantage of.
Also, I think it's most of the work happens between someone can see us do the work. I spend so much time just thinking, or air quotes, wasting time, but it marinates ideas. The information that I get from calls or from reading needs to sink in.
I'm constantly on runs with my phone, like note to self, when you get home, make sure you, because it's like on the run, everything's like, tick, 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 tick,
Yeah.
tick,
Yeah.
It's amazing how that, yeah. So the whole idea that productivity, that we need to be this whole 9 to 5 office thing. I really like, there was an interview with Seth Godin and Matt Mullenweg, and I think Seth Godin posed the question, if we had started remote and then everybody, and worked remote for 100 years, and then all of a sudden everybody said like, okay, now we're going to have these offices that you have to come to between the hours of 9 to 5, it would sound insane.
Yes, true.
It would sound insane. It's a relic.
Beautiful
it's a
thought
relic.
experiment.
Yeah, it was really smart. Seth Godin's amazing. So was Matt
Yes.
Mullenweg.
So if someone wanted to really shift themselves to be remote ready, where would you start? I mean, we were forced to throughout the pandemic, yeah, but I think we made it happen. And now it's kind of between the two. And I think many of us are still not really remote ready.
I mean, it sounds a little bit silly, but I always say like start with why. Like, because if you want to be remote because you want to be a digital nomad versus you want to be remote because you're taking care of your parents or your kids, or like me, you just want to be remote because you're introvert, like all of those things have very different reasons and setups for working, I would say. And like my husband hates remote. He just hates it. He's got a home office. He hardly ever uses it. It becomes a guest room when people come over. But he actually has an office with various clients that he goes to, or goes to a friend's office and work there together. So I think people really have to understand what they need, and it's an exercise in self accountability. Because if you're somebody who really needs a lot of social interaction, you're going to have to build that for yourself if you're going to be a remote worker in that way, right? Like a lot of people get their social interaction from being in the office, and they've really missed the office. They've missed the social because they haven't been at the office. And I'm completely confused by this, but I have to acknowledge that it happens. But, like I have a very rich social life on my own that I've built for myself that has nothing to do with an office. And so I feel like if you're relying on your random colleagues for your social needs, like that's a really good place to start, and just think about like where else could you go to meet that social need. Like maybe a co-working space will work for you. You don't have to work with your office colleagues, maybe, or a client space, or you get together with friends and switch houses. Like really, like what do you need for yourself? And then build that for yourself. And it's so interesting because, everybody has such a different need. Tim Ferriss wrote those books, Tools of Titans and Tools for, and it's like 1,000 pages of different techniques that all the great people used. And they're all different. Yeah. Like I've listened to his podcast on it and it's just every day. It's like every 5 minutes, it's somebody just who does something different that works for them. And I was just like, oh, you just have to find what works for you.
What a good reminder, and how often we forget. And this again links back to the step 1 user manual. What works for you and how can you communicate that to the others so that you can make it work amongst you?
Well, and also with your user manual, what I suggest is be really greedy and selfish. Mm-hmm. Like, what is your ideal? Like, you might not get it. You probably won't. You certainly won't. Like you really think about what's your ideal. Like, you probably won't get it. Like, my ideal is no meeting days. Mm. Yeah, but I run a business. So, I have to put up my grown-up pants and have meetings because I run it like, okay, my ideal is that I don't have to talk to anybody. But I run a business.
And still, I think being a freelancer, having your own business, you can do that. So, for instance, I have now Wednesdays are my work on business days. And I told my Google Calendar it's focus time and it declines all incoming requests by default. Yeah. And it's amazing.
And that's where having tools are great, right? Because the tools can do that work for you. You don't have to say no.
Exactly. Because otherwise my own focus time would be the first thing to go. Everything else has priority. And now 100%. I realize that having an entire day without meetings just for working on the business, the amazing ideas coming up.
I had yesterday the whole day free except for one presentation at 5 p.m. And this is a presentation I've done like numerous times over the years. It's literally like 13 minutes. I could do it in my sleep. I always practice beforehand because I just get super nervous before every workshop, before every presentation. I'm a bundle of nerves. Like, it's just how it is. But all day long, I kept thinking like, oh, it's one, like, oh, okay. Like, I had the whole day free, right? So it's like a whole day, but all day long, I was focused on that one 5 o'clock slot. Like, don't forget, it's 5 o'clock. I set an alarm so that I could rest my brain. Don't forget at 5 o'clock, you have this thing. Like, don't forget. So even that one meeting takes up so much brain space. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. We don't realize otherwise. It's like this one to do when we go to bed and we have to wake up very early at an unusual time to catch a flight or something.
Right.
You would wake up every 5 minutes. Like, is it time already?
Right. Like, can't miss the flight. Like, oh, can't miss the flight. Yeah.
Despite having 5 alarms or whatsoever.
Totally. It's a restless night's sleep because you have to. Yeah.
I would love to come back to this personal manual and what you said, that it's so important to be very honest about that, even though you might not get it. And I wonder to what extent, especially in the context of teams, what role does shame play and how do you facilitate that? Because I can imagine that maybe I was talking to a friend yesterday and she's working in an office. She's a manager and we were talking about user manuals of our team members. And she said, it took me 6 months to understand that he just needs me once per day to give him positive feedback and tell him how great stuff was. And he needs to come once per day into my office to tell me what great stuff he has done. It's a 5 minutes ritual that makes him happy and that keeps him running. If I had known this before, it would have saved us lots of tension and misalignment. And I wonder, what does it take for a person to actually write in the manual, you know what, actually, once per day, I just want to brag in front of my manager and get a little tap on my shoulder?
I don't know that that level of self-awareness, I don't even know if I would know that I needed that. Like, I don't know that person knows that he needs that to start with. However, there's this really powerful exercise from the Management 3.0 community called Moving Motivators. And it asks people, it's actually a physical card game, but I've adapted the cards online. There's only 10 cards, and they're each intrinsic motivations. So it goes everything from freedom to power to relatedness or acceptance. And the idea in the game is that you rank the motivations from most motivating to least motivating. And what you can start to see in that is what drives people to come to work to begin with. And so if you're a leader in the organization, like this, people need accolades. And I don't know, I can't remember which motivator that would be attributed to, but there's one where you need, affirmation. And and that's something that people need. That like that's a personality type, right? That there's some that need that. And so one of the things that I've realized is in an organ, especially thinking about team building after the pandemic, because that's one of the things that suffers, right? Is the connection between people and teams. But the real team building is in understanding why people come to work to begin with and what they need from that. Like for some people, it's all about challenging problems. Like this guy needs a pat on the shoulder. Other people, it's just a job.
Yeah. Others need a bonus.
You just need a bonus, right? You just need to know that this is going to be stable. Yeah. Fair. And also fair enough. Yeah. Right? Like some people just need to save for their retirement. My friend Abe, he is 100%, he's like 55 and he's like, I've got 10 years to go and I am 100% focused on making myself comfortable for retirement. That's what he's looking for. So shower him with money. He'll be more than happy and dedicated and loyal and doing great work, right? Yeah. So what I've really recognized about leadership, because I've had to build a couple of courses and I've had to look at my own leadership, and I've recognized that I am not a good team lead, because what a team lead really needs is focus on who are the people on your team and what do they need in order to feel connected. And it's never pizza parties and money. It's always they need transparency and empathy and communication. Like it's never, and sometimes money that all,
Yeah. And sometimes really just, freedom to bring in their own ideas or the flexibility you mentioned before. Yeah.
Right. Like just needing to, maybe your person on the team is super introvert and working from home just helps calm their nerves. They're happy to be there for everything, but they just need to be in their own space. Great. Do that. I don't know. It makes it sound so easy, but when I was a leader on the team, I found it exhausting. It takes a lot of time to really understand people.
Especially if you're an introvert.
And then you have additional responsibilities that you're also working on, right? You've got your own metrics that have to be done and your own work that has to be done. So there's really, I really have to say kudos to leaders out there. There's a lot of demand that is not easy. It sound so easy, like, oh, just understand why people come to work. And it's all like, that's all you need. And then actually, the devil's in the time.
Yeah. And I think it's, as any relationship, I was thinking when you described the motivators, I was thinking of the book with the 5 love languages and how we express and receive love. And it's a game changer once you understand it about the people around you and your partner. Okay, some need words of affirmations, other needs acts of service, and others just want presence.
Totally.
And once you know it, it's fine.
Totally. That book had a profound impact on my relationship, because I understood that like I am like a gift giver. Like I show love through like gifts and giving gifts. My husband and I have a joke of his love language is getting gifts. Like that's not how it works. But his was needing to spend time together and deep presence. And once I understood that, I was like, oh, because I'm an introvert. So like anytime I could get for myself, I was taking it. But I had to understand, like, actually, he just wants to be together. We don't have to, like that's important. I was like, oh.
Yeah.
But it's the same on teams. Once you understand everybody's, like, let's say their work language, then it becomes much easier. Yeah. But getting there is so time consuming.
Yeah, because you have to have the trust, you have to have the comfort, the normalizing that, we are all humans. We all have these desires and needs, and it's not problematic. There's no judgment. And I think there is shame related to that in many offices that, showing a human side, expressing needs, fallibility.
Well, also various cultures, they're like in France, work life is very separated and it is very frowned upon to bring your personal stuff to work. It's just separate. And so the idea of a personal user manual in France was really like, I got a lot of pushback from French participants because of that. And so it just goes back to the point though, of you only need to put in your user manual what you are comfortable sharing. Like you can make one just for you that has everything. And then you put forward what you're okay your colleagues knowing. Like your colleagues don't need to know everything about you. You don't have to hand people ammunition, right? We don't have to be our most vulnerable with everybody.
That's true.
We shouldn't be, because there's lots of people that will take advantage of it, as I found.
Oh, no.
They're super open and like, so I'm kind of naive in that way. And so, over time you learn.
Yeah. I think we all have our scars, right?
Yeah, as you get older. Yeah.
On the other hand, that's something that I learned from Jimbo Clark, who does these box workshops. So he puts boxes on people's heads, and then you write on the box what people see you doing at your best and what people see you doing when you're at your worst, and what's happening inside when you're at your best and your worst. And I love that because it also helps colleagues to see, oh, okay, if I'm starting every sentence with yes, but, it means that I'm maybe not in my best mood. So it has nothing to do with your idea. It's just me being at my worst.
Oh, right.
And then finding these patterns, it almost sounds or feels like a mini version of the manuals.
Yeah. Yeah. You're like discovering different aspects from it. Yeah, indeed.
Yeah. So, for instance, for me, when I'm at my best, I kind of wear colorful clothes and I maybe wear a little bit of makeup and I hum and I sing and I dance. And when I'm at my worst, I wear these huge T-shirts or I wear these hoodies and I don't play music. And people can recognize that so that they know immediately, oh, maybe today I won't ask her for a favor.
Right. Or today be a little gentle.
Yeah.
Or yeah. Oh, I love that. It's funny. My husband, when he's cheerful, he whistles. So I can always tell him, he's like, I was like, oh, okay. I love that.
Yeah. And it's nice to make it explicit for the colleagues and for oneself.
Also, because you're really getting to know people like that. That's the nonverbal communication that is really important to pick up on. And it's funny, when I was interviewing Paul, the astronaut, he was saying that the team that works together, they know each other so well that they have that nonverbal communication because they've trained together so long. So like through their helmets, it just takes a glance. Like they can, through their eyes, see what they need, kind of thing. Like, like the relationship you have with a close partner, right? Like I can see from a mile away if it's my husband or not. Like it's just the way he walks. And I can see what mood he's in by the way he walks. It's the same with astronauts. And, we don't need to get that close with our teams because astronauts are doing like high intensity work, right? So we don't necessarily need to train to know each other at a glance, but we could certainly be doing better than what we're doing now.
Yeah. Yeah. We would use so much friction and just acknowledging our humanity.
The empathy that everybody really craves. Just like it's been a hard time. We're not all at our best.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's so easy to say. And then when I travel and I'm walking through the airport, I'm always like, there all these people. Why?
Yes.
There's this funny Depeche Mode song that now goes through my head. It's called People Are Good. It's on their latest album. And it just talks about like, people are good. Say it under your breath. Like, remember, people are good, even though they're being jerks. Remember, they're just being jerks because they're tired. That's not what the lyrics say, but in general, yeah. So now when I'm going through like difficult, like people situations, I just have that song running in the background in my head. Like, people are good.
That's actually a song that needs to go on every remote workshop playlist.
Hey, maybe so. Yeah. This is a reminder, like assume positive intent. Yeah. Like most people are not out to get you.
Yeah.
They're just in their own worlds. Yeah.
The very most, yeah. With all the remote work and workshops you've been doing, what remains your number one facilitation challenge?
I wrote this down. I'm glad I wrote that down. I would not have remembered this in the moment. It's the nerve. I'm so nervous before every event, and the result is exhaustion. So I can't seem to just like show up and wing it. It's just like, so, even the talk yesterday that I've given numerous times, I practiced for an hour in the afternoon. It's a 13-minute talk. I still practice. I still, so because it's a performance. And I think of it as a performance. So I want to make sure I practice like a band would practice. Maybe it's because of all the music, you practice before you go on stage. You have a dress rehearsal to make sure everything's working. But I'm never not nervous. And before like in-person talks, man, I'm sweating bullets. People don't know how bad it is, but like I can hardly think, I'm so scared. And so I'm doing like breathing exercises. And I'm always wondering, like, why do I do this? Like, why did I choose this profession? And I still don't have the answer to that. But, I lived with a musician for 10 years in Nijmegen here in the Netherlands. We had our own apartments, but we shared a bathroom. It was a very weird setup, but it was like, a friend of the band had this inexpensive apartment that I was just going to live there for a few months. And then 10 years later, I was still there. It was such a lovely place. But he was a musician and he was 65 and he's been playing piano his entire life. And he just performs for a living. And I asked him if he still got nervous. And he just looked at me and he goes, every single time.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, so I stopped fighting it. And I've just sort of accepted that I'm going to be really nervous and that I'm going to be really tired, and I build it in.
Yeah.
Because I've tried to change me. Like, why should you be nervous? You could do this talk in your sleep. Like, it's memorized. It just doesn't, it's not a rational thing. So for me, yeah. Yeah, just so nerves and exhaustion is my number one facilitation challenge. Like I'm confident with the content because I've iterated and worked on it so much. And, I'm not really good with improv, but I'm working on that. I've started hosting these, I call them icebreaker playgrounds, where we're playing with different icebreaker activities just to understand. And for me, it's an opportunity to do something improv. And I like people seem to like them, but I hate them. I'm sweating, I'm literally sweating when they're happening. It's so uncomfortable. And I think that's why you have to do it. I learned in yoga that the more you hate the pose, the longer you have to hold it. That's what he said. I was like, oh, so yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess it's a good training for the muscle.
Leaning in, right?
Yeah. And still, I think, yeah. And a little bit of nervousness. Well, a little bit of nervousness usually makes sure that you're on your feet and that you're performing well and that you do have the focus. But yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it might be,
with less sweat.
Yeah, it would be great. That would be awesome. So, but I just dress in layers. I've always got a hoodie or something like that I can take on and off.
In dark colors, not to see the...
Yeah, exactly. Another layer to cover up anything. Yeah, indeed. It's just a fact. I've always been a highly anxious person just in general. And so I've just, you kind of learn to live with yourself at some point.
Do you have the same then with an interview as a podcaster?
Yes. It's not as intense for some reason because there's nothing you kind of have to, you can't plan it. But, you did send me questions in advance. I did prepare. I always prepare.
That's why I send them, because there are some guests who enjoy the preparation, and then I send them some questions that I usually don't ask, but at least they have something to prepare.
Yeah, but it gives me a chance to think through and
exactly.
kind of give myself okay, I want to make sure I say this, or I want to make sure this comes to mind, or yeah.
Yeah, because uncertainty stresses most people, to be uncertain. Okay, and if we can prepare a bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to think through, because if you had asked me what's your number one facilitation challenge, and then I come up with something off the cuff, it might have been like getting people to interact. And I'm like, well, that's not really a challenge. Like, that's easy. That's actually easy to do. Like, once you know how to do it, that kind of thing. But no, it's the self-management for me. But, maybe it's helpful for others because, I see my niece, she had to give her first presentation in school and she's 8. And it was on Donald Duck. And so I helped her with her PowerPoint because she never used PowerPoint. So I got to teach her. And her mom didn't know how to use PowerPoint. So I got to teach her how to use PowerPoint. And she was so nervous, she threw up before. And we practiced together, but she was so nervous, she threw up. And I thought, oh my gosh, how many people out there want to give presentations or want to be on stage somehow, but are so nervous and scared. And so I don't know where I got this, but I kept telling her, feel the fear and do it anyway. Take it with you. Yeah. So now I've got like a gang of butterflies. It's just like my gang. Like, come on, gang, we're going to another presentation. Like,
nice.
Follow me.
Oh, that's a sweet image. And I think that was it a TED Talk Where they explained that actually our physical reaction to excitement, positive excitement and fear is basically the same.
Yeah, but your brain is I've tried to trick my brain. Like I always say, like, come join me. And we do that before, but then right before on stage, it's like,
wow.
oh.
And you're still doing it. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
Well, there's so many women that I've learned that won't take the stage because they feel too scared. And so I wanted to, at least anybody listening that feels scared, I want to just say, like, do it anyway. Like your voice, whoever you are, your voice is also important.
And I think especially for women, I think there's also some, let's call it inherited trauma of being a woman. For so many decades and centuries, we're not supposed to be on stage and to speak in public and to take space and be that person.
Totally.
We're burned as witches. So of course we're scared.
Yeah, indeed. So I'm here to say, take the space, like feel the fear and do it anyway.
Yeah.
Easier said than done as you're throwing up before you go on stage, but still, I have a colleague who is so brilliant and she's just too scared to get on stage. I'm like, but it's so frustrating to see because she's so brilliant and you just wish the world could hear her.
Yeah. Thank you. We've spoken for almost 1.5 hours.
I know that's, I'm sorry.
For that. No, I'm glad. That's
I didn't even see the time.
You. I just want to make sure that we haven't skipped anything that you would have wanted to share, but we didn't touch upon yet.
No, there's nothing that I'm like, oh yeah, we have to say that. The only thing is that if people want, I have a super kit available that I can just give you to put in the show notes that people can download. And it's like a personal user manual, like how do you create one, and like a canvas for a team agreement. So it has some useful things in there just for getting started, like the basics.
I love that. We'll put that in the show notes so that everyone can download it.
Thank you.
Wonderful. And the link to your podcast.
Oh, yeah, thanks. Stories of remote teams doing great things. Yeah, all the great things that remote teams are doing.
Beautiful. And the story of the astronaut.
Yeah. So fun to interview him about space. So cool.
Thank you, Lisette. This has been wonderful.
Thank you. It's really lovely to have some one-on-one time with you.
Thank you for staying tuned and for listening until the very end. I hope that you found the inspiration and the wisdom that you are looking for. And I hope that you will subscribe to the show so that you never miss any of the interviews with another inspiring facilitator from across the world. I'm devoted to continue this podcast and to deliver weekly an episode that maintains the quality that you expect and you deserve. And if you would like to help me to maintain this quality and to keep the podcast free, please help us. Visit workshops.work/support to make a small donation to keep the podcast free. Thank you so much. I hope to be in your ears next week.